I've lived in Alaska most of my life. My family moved to Fairbanks when I was 6, and I never really left. I spent my summers working fish camps as a teenager, started guiding professionally in my early 20s, and that's basically been my life ever since. I'm 29 now. I work seasonally as a wilderness guide in northern Alaska, and I've been doing it long enough that I don't really get rattled out there. I don't get lost. Or I guess I should say, I didn't think I could get lost, because what happened 3 years ago forced me to reconsider that. My boyfriend at the time was Randy. He grew up in rural British Columbia and was basically the male version of me when it came to the outdoors. Actually, that's not really fair to him. He was probably more experienced than me in certain areas, especially winter navigation. We had been together about 4 years, and most of our relationship revolved around trips that would make normal couples absolutely miserable. Week-long hunts and backcountry camping where you actually have to plan, or you'll die. That sounds dramatic, but it's literally true up there. The plan was to snowmobile between two state-registered cabins about 60 miles apart. We'd spend a night at each and be back home in 4 days. We had done the exact trip twice before, and it had always been fine. The weather forecast looked good when we left, so we weren't worried at all. The first day was completely uneventful. We got to the second cabin by late afternoon, ate these freeze-dried meals that Randy swore tasted good, but were honestly terrible. And then we played cards. It was a pretty relaxing evening. The next morning, I woke up and realized there was a serious storm going on outside. It was basically a full-on blizzard that came out of nowhere, which was surprising because there had been nothing in the forecast indicating precipitation. Randy and I decided to brave the storm, even though we had plenty of food and could have waited another day. We should have waited. I know that now. Things went south really quickly. The wind was almost worse than the snow. It was incredibly hard to see anything. So Randy took the lead. I followed the track of his snowmobile, which made navigating a lot easier in low visibility. I don't know exactly how it happened, but 1 second Randy was moving along normally, and the next, his snowmobile was on top of him. I jumped off mine and ran over to him, but it was too late. His leg was bent in a way legs should never bend. Keep in mind, this was a guy who once finished a 2-day trek on a sprained ankle and didn't even mention it until we got back. So seeing him like that, I knew it was bad. The first thing I tried was getting him onto my snowmobile. That was the obvious move. Just ride both of us back to the cabin. But Randy was 6'2" and around 220 pounds, and a snowmobile in deep snow is already difficult to handle alone. I managed to get him onto the back once, kind of dragging him onto the seat, but he lasted maybe 10 seconds before sliding off. The sound he made when he hit the ground, I never want to hear that again. I tried one more time, and it was even worse. He couldn't grip with his legs at all, and every small shift caused him to slide. There was no way I could hold him and steer at the same time. After that second attempt, he told me to stop, and the way he said it, he wasn't asking, he was telling me. That's when we both understood what had to happen. I pulled out the satellite phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I managed to get a connection after a few tries, but I wasn't even sure if my message, our coordinates and situation, actually went through. Relying on someone else to rescue him was a terrible plan, and we both knew it. So I made the decision I would leave him sheltered with everything we had, then take my snowmobile and push for the nearest cabin to use the emergency radio. There wasn't much discussion. We just looked at each other, and that was it. I bundled him up with every extra layer we had and marked our position on my GPS. He told me to be careful, then told me not to do anything stupid, and then I left him there in the snow. I navigated mostly by instinct and GPS, but I was struggling to stay calm. After about 45 minutes, something felt wrong. The terrain didn't match what I expected. Landmarks weren't lining up. I told myself it was just the storm, messing with my perception, but the feeling kept getting worse. Then I saw smoke through the trees on my left. I turned toward it, thinking I had somehow looped back to one of the cabins. But the structure didn't match either one. It was smaller, and honestly kind of unsettling. One side of it was almost buried in a snowdrift. There was a faint glow from inside, and smoke was coming from the chimney. At that point, all I could think was, smoke means a person, and a person means help. I shut off the engine and walked to the door. I knocked several times. No answer. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, it was warm, clearly lived in. There was a wood stove burning, a bedroll on the floor, and a can of food with a spoon still in it, as if someone had just stepped out moments ago. I called out, but no one responded. I stood there warming my hands, trying the satellite phone again, but still nothing. I didn't want to go back out into that storm, but I had to. Randy was depending on me. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. On a shelf at the back of the cabin were binoculars, a folded map, and a notebook. I opened the map. It was a trail map of the area we had been riding through. Sections were circled, including both cabins we had stayed in. Next to them were dates, some from that winter, some from previous years. Then I opened the notebook. Whoever owned it had been documenting people, descriptions of individuals, what they wore, where they were headed. I felt a chill run through me. There was a good chance Randy and I were in that notebook, and I wasn't sticking around to find out. It's hard to explain what I felt in that moment. It wasn't immediate fear. It was like everything in that cabin suddenly rearranged itself in my mind. It didn't feel safe anymore. I put everything down and headed straight for the door. But before I could grab the handle, I heard a scream. The loudest, most horrifying scream I have ever heard. It came from beneath the floor. A woman. She wasn't saying anything, just screaming like she was being tortured. The sound hit me so hard I literally jumped. And then I ran. I sprinted out of that cabin, started my snowmobile, and rode away without looking back. I never saw that cabin again. The rest of the journey is a blur. At some point, I reached the actual cabin and managed to contact help through the emergency radio. They sent a helicopter. Randy was hypothermic and barely hanging on, but he survived. His leg was in terrible condition, but he was alive. I told authorities everything. Days later, they claimed they couldn't find any cabin matching my description. One of them even suggested I hallucinated the whole thing. I lost it on him. There are only 3 possible explanations, and none of them are good. I hallucinated everything. It was real, and I left someone behind to die. It was a trap, and I narrowly escaped becoming the next victim. I still think about it all the time.